How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Shebeen. Happy Easter, wherever you're joining us from. If you're catching us on the replay, I hope you're doing well. It's Sunday evening. It's 7 o'clock Eastern, midnight Irish time. I hope you've got something nice, something Irish that you can pour into your glass. We are about to embark on a marathon session of a Shebeen tonight covering family whiskey brands. So pour yourself something decent in your glass. Make sure you've got somewhere comfortable to sit and sit back and enjoy the next 7, 8, 9 hours of crack, chat, and community on the Shebeen. Let us know what you're drinking. I'd love to know what's in your glass. As always, keep us posted on what you find on your shelf, what you're pouring. Tonight, we're going to talk about family whiskey brands. Before we do that, I want to make sure you've all got a drop of whiskey in your glass. I'll share what I'm drinking. I'm drinking a drop of the Clan 19-year-old single malt, which we'll discuss at length as part of our feature this evening on family brands. That's one of our brands, a Hascraw Spirits, a Hascraw distillery. So I'm sipping on that. It's an ex-Cooley sourced single malt, aged predominantly in bourbon barrels and finished in Oloroso sherry casks. A really heavy sherry bomb of a whiskey. It feels like a full sherry maturation rather than a finish. I'd love to know what you're drinking. I've got some nice whiskeys showing up in the comments already. Welcome to everyone who's joining us. Tony and Roy Healy, Richard Crandall, Cian Boland. How are you all getting on? Johnny McNally, hi to Stacey, hi to Bob, hi to Lauren. I know there's lots competing for your time tonight. Easter, family may be around. If you celebrate Easter, the golf is on, the Masters is on. Turn off the golf. You don't need it. Instead, you need to focus on the whiskey. The Masters is practically over anyway. It looks like the winner's already pretty much on the home straight. So focus on the Irish whiskey. Get your priorities right tonight. If you can't join us for the whole Shebeen tonight, of course, we have a replay available as soon as our broadcast ends. All of our Shebeens are available on our YouTube channel, free, no subscription, no login needed. The Shebeen is a piece of Irish culture, a piece of Irish unofficial society. It's a piece of society in Ireland. You know, it's an under the counter element of our lives. The Shebeen is an unlicensed premises. It's where you can go to find alcohol when you're not supposed to find alcohol. It's a place where you go when the pubs are closed. It's a place where you go when you want to have some drinks with your friends. And some Shebeens, every town in Ireland has a Shebeen, and a Shebeen can be more elaborate and more impressively built out than a real pub and hidden away from the authority. So we're hidden away, we're squirreled away tonight, illicitly enjoying our Irish whiskey. We're going to talk about all of the family brands that make up whiskey tonight, so I'm really excited to go through those. There are so many that we can touch on. We won't cover them all because there are, from the distilleries to the brands, probably more than 100 different family brands, but we'll touch on quite a few of them this evening over the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. Who knows? Many of you have tomorrow off. It's a bank holiday in Ireland and the UK. Some of you might have a time off or might have a day off in the United States too. If you do, let us know, and you can stay a little bit later tonight. Chris is joining us from Fort Myers. Hi to Chris. Hi to Kristen in New York. Happy Easter. Julie, happy Easter to you. Caroline got a little Easter bunny there. Very good. All right. So before we get started on our family whiskey brands tonight, I want to go through a few bits of housekeeping. So the first thing is a reminder to those of you who are trying to get hold of a last bottle of our Shorecross whiskey. We're down to our last 8 bottles. Yesterday we had 17. Today we have 8. Last week we had 25. So almost gone, almost out of our Shorecross whiskey. If you are interested in this historic single malt, our last Whiskey Club release, then you'll really have to act fast. You can buy a bottle on storiesandsips.com. There's only 8 bottles left. And when they're gone, they're gone. And if they don't sell by Wednesday, we're taking them off the market and we're keeping them for future events and adding them to our liquid archive. So just wanted to give you a reminder, you're under no pressure to buy or to buy multiple. I know many of you have, but thank you for all the support for those of you that have purchased. But just a friendly reminder, the last 8 bottles are now listed on our website. So if you want to secure 1 or 2 or 3, then go ahead and do that. Also, a reminder of some of the items that went on our website this week. So on storiesandsips.com, we have a great interview, a video interview between Mark McLaughlin and Dahi O'Connell from WD O'Connell. We'll be talking about WD O'Connell this evening, the business of sourcing, maturing, and vatting casks. So we started a series for our Whiskey Club members a couple of weeks back on a behind-the-scenes element of the whiskey world. And our first feature was the Dram in a Can with Shane McCarthy from Two Stacks Irish Whiskey. And Mark interviewed Shane to understand the business of bringing a can to market, something that had never been done before in the world of whiskey, a straight whiskey in a can, and what challenges he had to overcome. This week, we published our video interview, a video chat between Mark and Dahi O'Connell on how Dahi sourced his first ever casks for his whiskey bonding company and how he selects casks, what his vision is for his whiskies, how he decides how long whiskeys should age for, what barrel types and wood types he's most interested in. So if you have an interest in the behind the scenes element of the world of Irish whiskey, be sure to check that out. That's on storiesandsips.com, as is the Dram in a Can interview. They're both available on our website. And we also added a feature in response to a question we got during the week, which is regarding grain whiskey, Irish grain whiskey, or single grain Irish whiskey. And I got a question wondering what it is, and if there was, the question was, what's the one single grain that's in single grain whiskey? And that is a good question and allowed me to answer that question fully. So I added that to our website, Irish grain whiskey, and of course the word single means number of distilleries, not number of grains, but we explain in detail technically what a grain whiskey is in Ireland, what the legal definition is, which is now covered by European law, and examples of grain whiskies that we have both released ourselves through Stories and Sips Whiskey Club and that are on the market as well. That's on the website for your enjoyment. There's no login needed for that one. That's available on the site. And then we also did a great interview with Brian Nation, master distiller, formerly of the Middleton Distillery, and Patrick O'Shaughnessy, founder of the O'Shaughnessy Distillery in Minnesota, in Minneapolis in Minnesota. Brian and Patrick were on a whirlwind tour of Ireland last week, launching Keeper's Heart whiskey in Ireland for the first time. And I caught up with the two of them in the Shelburne Bar in Cork. We sat down, we had a good old chat for about 20 minutes. Great fun, great crack interview. The two of the guys were on fire. They were roaring with crack. There's even a song in there as well. So be sure to check out that video interview and chat on our website as well, storiesandsips.com. One of the few American brands that we actually feature on Stories and Sips, that together with Talnua Distillery. And the reason we feature those two distilleries is that they're inherently Irish. They might not be in Ireland, but O'Shaughnessy Distilling stole Brian Nation from Middleton Distillery and has embarked on a Irish-inspired journey that includes blending Irish whiskies with American whiskies. And so we're following their journey. And in our whiskey club, we've also put down a cask of American pot still whiskey in O'Shaughnessy Distilling, which Brian distilled for us, one of the first casks distilled in the distillery. And we have one of those casks there. So we always love to catch up with Brian and find out what Brian and Patrick are up to. And Talnua Distillery in Colorado, we feature regularly. We've released a whiskey with them in the past, America's first ever bottled and bond single pot still whiskey from Colorado last year. And that is a distillery that makes exclusively single pot still whiskey, American single pot still whiskey, inspired by Ireland's approach. So we feature those two American distilleries regularly. I know we got that question in our Facebook community this week. Why do we allow posts about American brands? Well, they're the two that we tend to focus on and tend to allow in the group. All right, James Doherty from Sleeve League Distillers is joining us, having a midnight silky at midnight, but he's doing the tours tomorrow, so won't be here for 3 hours. James, you're off the hook. Don't worry. We'll be talking about your brands in a little bit. Silky whiskies. I've got a few of them right here. Dahi O'Connell is joining us. Good man, Dahi. Having a family reserve 20 there. Good man. Happy Easter to you, Dahi. David Stewart from Los Angeles. Legendary dark silky in his glass. Great stuff. Stacey is joining us there. Rick is joining us from drizzly Seattle. Is there any other Seattle other than a drizzly Seattle? It's a bit like Ireland, isn't it? All right, so let's crack on. Let us crack on. A reminder, though, just before we do that, we do have many different interviews, articles, explanations, definitions on our website on storiesandsips.com. If you want to dive into learning more about Irish whiskey, if you want to dive into the history of Irish whiskey, the business of Irish whiskey, storiesandsips.com is a growing archive of information, both freely available to anybody who visits the website and some of our recorded events and more in-depth interviews and podcasts and exclusive materials are available to our Whiskey Club members, which we'd love to have you a member of as well. So let's talk about family owned or run Irish whiskey brands, because the world of Irish whiskey to me is it's a lot of fun. I get great enjoyment out of it, not because I'm constantly drinking whiskey, though that's always a bonus to enjoy good, well-produced spirits. But to me, the joy of the world of Irish whiskey, for as long as I've been involved in it, is the people. It's meeting interesting people who are doing interesting things, who I have, over the course of the last 6 or 7 years of being involved in the world of Irish whiskey, have made great friends, both on both sides of the counter, from those who make the whiskey, those who sell the whiskey, and those who drink the whiskey. And I've always maintained that if I couldn't anymore, for whatever reason, ever have another drop of whiskey again, so long as I could keep having the conversations, the chats, and meeting the people who make the whiskey, I'd be just as happy. Well, maybe not exactly as happy, but not far off it. So for me, the world of Irish whiskey is driven by the great people. Of course it is. The great people in the places across the island of Ireland who make the whiskey that we all enjoy. Now, I want to focus tonight on a selection of the families that are putting their own money, their family's money, their friends' money, their time, their resources, their talent on the line to fulfill a vision, to pursue a dream, to grow Irish whiskey, to build out an Irish whiskey business. And every one of them has a different reason for doing it. It might be to bring business to their town where employment has long since left. It might be a passionate love for the spirit, for the history behind it. Whatever the reason is, there are myriad families across the island of Ireland who are risking it all on a daily basis, putting in the long hours. We have the easy work. I certainly have the easy work here of talking about whiskey, and I don't for a second dismiss the work that goes in to producing what eventually ends up in our bottles here. And we don't often realize just what it's taken, the number of decisions that had to be made, and the number of sleepless nights that went into getting a bottle in our hands, and all of the things that prevented or could have prevented it from getting into our hands along the way. So tonight we're going to we're going to celebrate, we're going to toast the families that make the world of Irish whiskey so interesting. I will miss out on some because there are hundreds of families, let's be honest, involved in the world of Irish whiskey. So tonight we'll probably focus on 16, 17 or 18, maybe different families that are involved in the world of Irish whiskey. We will toast them, we'll celebrate them. Some of them will be familiar to you. Some of them we have collaborated with over the past few years with our Whiskey Club. Many of them you have met through our online events, our virtual events, and our in-person events, and others might be new to you. So my hope is that you'll connect maybe a little bit more with the families, with the people behind the whiskey brands. Maybe you'll seek them out on social media. Maybe you'll visit their website. Maybe you'll give them a follow online, and maybe you'll keep a tab on what they're doing because they're doing interesting things. You might particularly resonate with one or another, and I think we all have our brands that we favor or that we find that we go back to again and again, often because we're actually fans of the people as much as we are of the whiskey. So it's good that we get to know the people. And tonight we'll do that. And we'll work through some of these brands together and we'll raise a glass. I'm not going to have a glass of every single one of these whiskey brands as we go through the night, or I'll be delivering this live stream horizontally from the floor, which would be of no use to me or no man, woman or child. So instead, I'll have a few sips of a few different whiskeys as we go through. If there's one or two or three whiskeys that you look at and say, Barry, tell us a little bit more about that whiskey, give us some tasting notes. If it's here in front of me, we'll pop it open, we'll dive into it, and we'll talk about it. But I'm here tonight for one reason only, and that's to hero, celebrate, and toast the families, the individuals who are putting everything on the line to fulfill their vision and to grow the world of Irish whiskey. All right. We can't get into the business of family brands without first acknowledging that there are some behemoths in the world of Irish whiskey. And the world of Irish whiskey is dominated by a few distilleries and a few brands. Jameson, of course, being the undisputed market leader by a massive factor, biggest selling Irish whiskey in the world. Tullamore Dew is the second best selling, but even that is only 10% of the volume of Jameson. These numbers are maybe a year out of date, but it gives you the idea of where the top kind of 4 or 5 are in terms of the big brands. Proper number 12, Proximo Spirits. Number 4, Bushmills, Proximo Spirits. Number 5, Redbreast. Number 4 and 5, 3, 4 and 5 can kind of vacillate between each other. Paddy Irish whiskey features in there as well, occasionally, depending on the numbers. So the reason I share this is because these are the market leaders. They are selling the most by volume, but many of these started as family brands. For example, Jameson, of course, the Jameson family back in 1780, they had no idea that 245 years later, they would be the biggest, still the biggest Irish whiskey brand in the world. Tullamore Dew started as a family business back in the old B. Daly distillery in Tullamore. Bushmills, going all the way back, I mean, at various points through its life, has been a family business, even today, owned by a family-owned business today. So these are the dominant players, and they have gone out to open markets, establish distribution channels, and create awareness, interest, and excitement around Irish whiskey. Their success is the success then of the smaller producers, because it is on their shoulders that the smaller producers get to stand. They get to be inspired by and maybe encouraged by what's happening at the top end of the market. And who knows, in 5, 10, 15, 20, 100 years, some of these smaller brands, these family brands that we're talking about, might be in the top 5 of Irish whiskey. Stranger things have happened. 5 years ago, or 6, let's go back a little bit further, 6 or 7 years ago, there was no proper number 12. It's now the number 3 selling whiskey in the world. So we can argue about that brand all day long, but it does go to show that there is a way for a brand to get higher up the sales ladder with the right approach. So let's start by looking at right now across the island of Ireland. There are more than 40 distilleries, between 40 and 46, depending on how we classify them and what day of the week we're kind of counting. But the island of Ireland is pretty much is well covered today, and there's more in production. There's more on the way. There's more in construction, under construction, that haven't yet commissioned their stills. So going back just to 2010, 2011, there was 4 or 5 distilleries in Ireland, and now it's 10 times that. Massive growth, almost entirely driven by small family-run brands, individuals who have secured investment from friends and family and maybe institutions along the way, and backers, but have risked lots themselves. And so this growth that we're seeing over the last 10 years, 12 years is in terms of the breadth of Irish whiskey brands is really much is very much driven by individuals and by families, and those are the ones we're going to hear tonight. All right. I'll put this a little bit smaller, but if you need it any bigger, let me know. I'm going to be out of breath and out of liquid, I'd say, very quickly from all the talking I'll do tonight. And feel free to put your questions in as you go. As we go through this, any questions at all? There's no stupid questions. If you want to know more about a brand, a distillery, let me know, and we'll dive into it. If I can't answer the question, we'll find the answer for you tomorrow. So we're going to start with Clonakilty, and I'm going to share with you a map of Ireland for each of the brands we talk about, and we'll move around Ireland and we'll dive into them. So Clonakilty, not too far away from where I'm at the moment. 45 minutes drive west down to West Cork. Clonakilty is, of course, a family-run brand. It's a distillery that was started back in 2016, 2017. It's run by the Scully family, and the Scully family have been farmers in Clonakilty for the last 9 generations. So very much a family business here, and family run. Michael Scully and his wife run the distillery. Sean Scully, for example, their son, he's in the United States, leading kind of brand ambassadorial and kind of sales channels on the West Coast. So this is a family that has invested in the town, invested more than 10 million into the building of a distillery right in the heart of Clonakilty. Their family has been farming in and around the area of Clonakilty at West Cork for 9 generations. This is Galley Head, which is a headland that sticks out into the Atlantic Ocean on one of those fingers of rocks that are the headlands that make up the southwest coast of Ireland. Galley Head Lighthouse has been guarding the coast there since the 1870s. In fact, the Scully family have been farming the land long before there was ever a lighthouse there. But this gives you some sense of the size of the headland there. But right there on the headland, on Galley Head itself, in the very shadow of the lighthouse, the Scully family farm fields there. They've planted heritage varieties of barley. They've planted hunter variety barley. They've planted regular malting barley as well, right there on Galley Head. And many farms around the area supply barley just the 2 or 3 miles it takes to get them to the distillery. So they've been very much involved, very much a family business, and very much part of the community there for the last 9 generations. Clonakilty's had a good presence in the United States for the past number of years. Since they opened the distillery, they took the decision early on to source whiskey, to establish the brand, to be able to tell the story of Clonakilty. They built a visitor center that they want people to come and visit before they ever release their own whiskey. So as of today, they have not released any of their own distilled stock, but instead they have their own sourced whiskies. It's a remarkable setup from a geographical standpoint, in the sense of within a kind of a 3 to 4 mile radius, you've got the distillery right in the heart of Clonakilty, in an old bank building in a roundabout in the town. You've got the farms surrounding the town growing barley, and then you've got this Atlantic warehouse overlooking the ocean, which is a remarkable location for a warehouse, and that is affected by the sea spray, by the ocean right there, a couple 100 feet away from it. Oisin Mulcahy is the head distiller. You see him there on the screen. If you want to do a tour of the distillery or a tour of the warehouse, you can do so on our website on storiesandslips.com. Oisin led us through a tour of the warehouse not too long ago. That's available on storiesandslips.com. And they're in the process of building another warehouse right now, because they've absolutely maxed out their capacity for storage here in the warehouse up on top of the Atlantic sea cliffs. You'll be familiar with some of their range, their core range there, which has been pretty present in the United States. They had a good online presence selling e-commerce wise, port cask, Bordeaux cask, single grain. They've had some blends that they've made that have done the round, especially on the East Coast. They had a good presence on the East Coast, shipping out of Florida. And then they've also done a lot of work collaborating with breweries on the East Coast and the West Coast of the United States. So some of you may be familiar with some of the breweries, like I think Pelican Brewery with Manor Hill Farms that they collaborated with. They've collaborated with Revival. They've done a Fuzzy Duck release. So they've been very active in securing casks of ex beer casks, shipping them over to Ireland, filling them up with Clonakilty whiskey, having the beer impart the flavors into the whiskey, and then bottling them up and shipping them back to the United States as collaborations. So yeah, let us know if you're familiar with Clonakilty. They also have gin and vodka as well. Johnny says hard time finding it on Long Island. They also do shipping online as well. So I think you can find, Johnny, I think it's just go to I think it's ClonakiltyDistilleryUSA.com as far as I remember. Tony says hard to find in Florida. It should be the easiest to find in Florida. Check Clonakilty Distillery USA and give them a shout, because they have brand presence. They have Padraig, one of the directors of the company, lives in Florida. So that's the first of our family-run businesses. And if you go to visit if you go to visit the distillery, there's a good chance you'll run into Michael Scully. He's always very keen to show off the distillery and show off what they're doing. For those of you who are joining us on the whiskey bus, Michael is we're going to visit Clonakilty Distillery, and Michael is laying on a great experience for us. We're going to visit the farms. We're going to visit the fields where they grow their barley. We're going to go out to Galley Head. If we can, we're going to get to see the warehouse. And we'll have a really exclusive experience in Clonakilty for those of you joining us on our whiskey bus in August as well. Next up is we're moving a little bit further west. We're going down to Killarney in the county of Kerry. Not a distillery this time, but we're featuring Wayward Irish Spirits, home of the Liberator brand of Irish whiskey. And I know we have some fans like Stacey, big fan of the Liberator. The Liberator and Wayward Irish Spirits, based in Killarney, just 2 minutes outside Killarney town. You'll find Morris O'Connell, Sir Morris O'Connell, very much a family business, and also really investing in the family name and the family legacy. The Liberator was the nickname given to Morris's ancestor, Daniel O'Connell, the great liberator, the man who helped the Catholics in Ireland get many rights, fought for their rights in Ireland, and was considered a hero in Ireland, and inspired the anti-slave, the abolitionist movement in the United States. And so he'd been a big hero in Ireland in the 1800s. So Morris O'Connell, Sir Morris O'Connell, on the banks of Loch Lean in Killarney, the lakes of Killarney, is where he is. He is both growing his barley and maturing his whiskey. So he sends it off for distillation. So here's the beautiful surroundings here. There's the home of Wayward Irish Spirits. To the right of the picture, out of picture, are the stone warehouses, we'll call them, but they're really almost like old converted stables. And they are where they're so small that you can't even get a port pipe or a sherry cask in the door. You can only get a bourbon barrel in the door, but that's where the whiskey is matured. The Morris maintains that that part of Ireland has a unique microclimate due to the Gulf Stream and the slightly milder conditions temperature wise. And he has done the studies on how long during the year the casks are in the ideal temperature range for maturing. So when casks get below a certain temperature, there's not a whole lot of interaction with the wood. As long as they stay within a certain temperature, and don't ask me what that is because I'm no scientist, the casks will do their work of maturing. And Morris maintains that he gets more months out of the year than other parts of Ireland that would be colder. And he talks about the palm trees that grow right there in Killarney. And he's not wrong about that microclimate. You follow that Gulf Stream along the south coast of Ireland. You go to Cove, where I grew up. We took it for granted. I thought everywhere in the world had palm trees, like, and the rest of Ireland had palm trees. We had palm trees in Cove growing up, and I thought that was normal. It turns out it's not. Just a slightly milder climate that we've got there. So Morris is working away there. Morris and his wife, it's a family business, maturing their whiskey. He's got not only has he got the Liberator range of whiskey. So, for example, here's one of them here. This is the malt and muscatel finish, Liberator. Lovely drop of whiskey. Beautiful sweetness to this. My only complaint is the bottles are too small, 350 milliliters. These are Morris's sourced whiskeys. So he's sourcing the whiskey from distilleries, Great Northern Distillery predominantly. He's doing the maturation in his distillery or in his warehouses. But then he recently released his Lakeview Single Estate. So this is the Lakeview Single Estate. Like I'm holding it up here like I'm at mass or something. This is a whiskey that was distilled using the barley that Morris grew on the estate on his land. He sent it off to Great Northern Distillery. They distilled it. They gave Morris back his new make spirit. He cast it and stored it in on the grounds right next to the field where the barley grew, and matured it there for a number of years and bottled it as his first ever single estate whiskey. So that's an interesting approach and an interesting variation on all. Well, I suppose there's so many varieties and variations on that whiskey journey, from where it's distilled, where the barley comes from, where it's matured, etc., where it's bottled, and all these things will have an effect certainly. But Morris maintains that he ages his whiskey closer to the barley, where the barley grows, than maybe anywhere else, and he might not be wrong. Roy is sipping on the same whiskey, the malt and muscatel. Yeah, it's a lovely drop. It's a lovely drop. We had a great Meet the Maker event with Sir Morris O'Connell. So again, if you want to dive into the story of how he started the business, why he went about doing it, the history of the O'Connell family in whiskey, in the liquor business, in the whiskey business, both legally and illegally over the years, and Morris's attempts at doing it the right way, and yeah, turning over a new leaf for the family and doing it the right way. You can find a great interview, a great chat we had with Morris on our website as well, storiesandsips.com. We have a great, probably an hour-long interview with Morris did with us. And we've spoken to Morris quite a few times, actually. Maybe we've had 2 interviews with him at this stage. But it's Morris is a gentleman and a great, he's great crack and is always interested in sharing his knowledge and what's working and what's not working for him with his whiskey. So he is another one of our family whiskey brands that we're focused on today. I think I'll pour a drop of the malt and muscatel next. We're going to keep moving west. We're moving through these at breakneck speed. And before we move on to this next one, I'd ask, all I ask of you tonight is to click the like button. If you're watching, just click that like button. It's underneath the video, and hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. It'll do it automatically if you're logged in. Just hit the subscribe button, but definitely hit the like button. That helps. And if you want to share this video with anybody at any time, I will not stop you. I'll encourage you. If you've just joined us, very welcome. We're heroing, showcasing, and toasting the family whiskey brands that make up the Irish whiskey industry. The big whiskey brands get lots of attention. They have lots of marketing dollars and pounds and euros to spend to get us to pay attention. And let's be honest, we do. And I'm as guilty as the next person of paying attention to them. But I'm so enamored and enthused and encouraged by the people I meet in the world of Irish whiskey at the smaller end of the scale. Those who are turning out a cask a week or release a cask every few months, and those small individual, independent, mostly family-run whiskey companies are ones that get me very excited. And one day they'll be at the top of the table and perhaps replacing some that sit there today. So we want to encourage them, and we want to follow them online on social media, and we want to support them wherever we can. And all of the ones I'm focusing on tonight, I do think have stock, have distribution in the United States. If they don't, we'll talk about it, and we'll indicate that as we go. We're going down to Dingle for good reason. The Dingle Distillery. I have a bottle of batch number 4 single malt here. I'm realizing as I laid out these bottles tonight of all the different distilleries, just how low the stock has gotten on so many of these bottles. And that's a great sign, because I haven't done it all myself. I've shared it. I've shared them with friends who visited, or if I'm going to visit somebody, I'll bring them little sample bottles of whiskey. But it is, you never realize just how low your bottles get until you start laying them out, and you're almost embarrassed by how low they've gotten. And you have to remind yourself, no, you didn't drink them all yourself. Somebody else drank them with you. Dingle is in many ways, more ways than one, a family whiskey brand. It is the whiskey distillery that I would argue, and many would argue, kickstarted or led the charge for the independent whiskey revolution we're experiencing right now, and this next evolution of the Irish whiskey category. Back in 2012, when they opened their doors, there wasn't, they were the first newly built independent distillery to have purpose-built distillery to have opened in 100 years in Ireland. And in the 10 years that followed, 25, 30 more followed. So Dingle showed up on many new distilleries' business plans over the years as being a model that people wanted to copy or were inspired by or saw the benefit in emulating in some way. And it's a family business right from the start, and that has continued all the way through. It was founded by Oliver Hughes and his cousin, Liam Mahart and Peter Mosley, back in 2012. And the three of them had already been in the drinks business. They ran the Porterhouse Brewing Company. They had Porterhouse pubs in Dublin and New York and London. And Oliver Hughes was a huge Dingle fan, a Dingle supporter. He holidayed in Dingle. He spent a lot of time in Dingle with his family, and had this mad idea prior to 2012 to start a distillery, which they did. He managed to get backing. He managed to get people bought into this crazy idea. He was the first to sell casks of whiskey when they didn't even exist, and get people to invest in a cask, become a founding father of the distillery for whatever it cost at the time, 6,000-7,000 euros, I think, at the time. And hundreds of people did, and they helped fund the distillery. And sadly, Oliver never got to see his whiskey out in the wild. He passed away before the whiskey came of age, and never got to see it. And it was a terrible loss to the whiskey world. Today, Oliver's son Elliot runs the company. So the Hughes family maintain they maintain that family through line from that founding all the way through to today. And so a big loss to Dingle when Oliver was lost, passed away, and a big loss to the drinks world, and of course his family and to those who worked in Dingle. But it's a family business in other ways too. It's a family business because today it's run by a family, really. Faye and Graham Cool. Graham is the master distiller, but everybody knows that Faye does the real work down there. And nobody you can't interact with the team in Dingle either online or in person without coming across Graham or Faye. And two Scots that were recruited to join the distillery a few years back and have become a fixture and a mainstay of Dingle and are considered locals now at this stage down in the town. They've got their preferred seats in the pubs locally and everybody knows them. And so it's a family business still to this day. It's Graham and Faye. You don't see Graham without Faye and you don't see Faye without Graham, which is a fantastic thing. But there's another family member that also sadly passed away, and that's Mary Ferreter. And Mary, a good friend of, I got to know Mary over the years and became friends with Mary. And she was the founding mother, really, of the distillery. She was involved from day one, really the unofficial lady mayor of Dingle. There wasn't a person she didn't know. There wasn't a relationship she hadn't forged in not just Dingle, but across the United States. She'd made great relationships, great friendships. When COVID kicked off, I remember her shipping hand sanitizer that was made at the Dingle Distillery to my mother in Cove. She insisted on taking care of people. And Mary was responsible for bringing Graham and Faye to the distillery and convincing them that Dingle was the place to move their lives to from Scotland. And she did so successfully. And Mary sadly passed away in 2021, and a terrible loss to all of us and to Dingle and to her family and to the distillery. But Mary's imprint on the distillery lives on and will never fade because she was a force of nature, and the distillery is what it is today because of Mary. So we raise a glass to Mary tonight as well. The town of Dingle historically, when I was growing up, was known for one thing only. It wasn't known for whiskey. It wasn't known for gin. It was known for a dolphin, and that dolphin was Fungi, the Dingle dolphin. And I remember going to visit Fungi back in the early mid 90s, and famously you'd go out in a fishing boat with the local fishermen in Dingle, and they wouldn't take your money to go out unless you saw the dolphin, and they knew you'd see the dolphin because Fungi came up to every boat that went out into the harbour. But it was a very clever little trick. The Kerry people don't need any marketing lessons in Kerry, and you go out in the boat and Fungi would invariably jump up like this, and it became a fixture of the town. And everybody who went to Dingle went out to see Fungi. Sadly, Fungi disappeared during the COVID lockdowns. A very social creature, and I think that when people locked down and didn't go out in boats anymore, maybe Fungi thought that everyone had abandoned her, and off she went and never came back. Sadly, I'm really bringing the mood down now with sadly all of the losses in Dingle. But Fungi has been replaced in terms of popularity now in Dingle with, I think, whiskey and gin. The core range of whiskeys you'll be familiar with, and they were released initially in batches. Batch 1 all the way up to, was it batch 5 or batch 6? Batch 6, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 6 batches. And those were the first 6 batches to go out of the distillery, which gave them 6 years to find their feet, figure out what kind of a distillery are they going to be, what path is their distillate taking, what cask programs are they going to follow. And then, of course, when Graham Cool joined, he got to put his own imprint and his own stamp on things as well. So you'll see these are the brands, the whiskies that have made their way, some of them to the United States. I think batch 3, 4, and 5 maybe made their way to the United States. But now we've also got this core release, which is a permanently available single malt. Different branding, different look, dark blue, lovely color. That's available as a permanently available expression, non-age statement, no batch on it. All the other batches had different cask maturations. Some were bourbon and sherry, some were bourbon, sherry and port, some were bourbon, sherry and Madeira. Dingle single malt is bourbon and sherry only, I think, as far as I remember. Somebody will correct me if I'm wrong on that one. But my favorites that have come out of Dingle of late are their seasonal releases that started to come out a few months ago, celebrating Samhain, celebrating May, Bealtaine, celebrating St. Bridget's Day, individual releases, unusual cask finishes, rye cask finishes, for example. These have been my favorite releases yet from the distillery, and shows, I think, what can happen when you take the distillate and start to figure out a cask program that might work best for that distillate in terms of finishing, secondary maturations, etc. So keep an eye out. I don't know. Some of these might make their way to the United States, but mostly they're available in Ireland in small batches, these seasonal releases. I think they're releasing 6 of those this year, maybe 6 of them next year, over kind of a calendar of various festivals, kind of a festival release series. And then word is that there may or may not, if you think about it, 2012 is when they first started distilling. So more than 10 years ago, they've never released an age statement whiskey yet. So who knows? Keep an eye out. Maybe there'll be a special release coming soon. Who knows? Something to keep an eye out on. I'll keep you posted anyway if there is. Johnny says Dingle is my place to go if I need to run and hide. No squealing. Lots of you know fungi. And Rick just cracked open the Dingle single malt. Very good. He hasn't opened his bottle of Samhain yet. Yeah, I really enjoyed the Samhain release. I had it at Dick Mack's pub there a few months ago and really, really enjoyed it. James is still claiming Mary is a Killybegs woman. That's right, Mary Ferreter, Donegal woman originally. You'll have to fight the Dingle people for her, James. Chris says the single malt batch 5 is nice. Yeah, my favorite of the batches was batch 4. Personally, I like the port cask, and I use this quite a lot. This batch 4 in tastings. I did a lot of virtual tastings with this. So some of you will remember our first ever whiskey kit that went out there. Oh, that's interesting, actually. Our first ever Stories and Sips Whiskey Club tasting had 3 whiskeys in it. All 3 of them are family brands, and all 3 of them are featured here tonight. Dingle, Sleeve League, we had the legendary Dark Silky, and we had JJ Corrie, the Gale. All 3 of those were family brands, which is actually fantastic. Now that I think of it, a happy coincidence. All right, let's keep it going. Let's keep her lit. We're moving back along the east, back east now along the south coast. We're going to W.D. O'Connell, another family-run brand. Dahi and his family run W.D. O'Connell Whiskey Merchants in Kilmacthomas in Waterford. Again, another whiskey bus stop for those of you joining us on the whiskey bus. We are spending some time with Dahi in his wonderful new brand home, which isn't open to the public yet, but we're squeezing our way in there because we're very insistent and we're very loud, and we ask often, can we do this? Can we do this? And we break people down until eventually they say, yeah, come on in. So come on, if you just stop asking me. So we're going to see Dahi and W.D. O'Connell Whiskey Merchants home in Kilmacthomas in County Waterford. There's the bearded, gorgeous man himself. You can tell this is an old photograph because his single malt there is 17-year-old in the photograph. He's up to 20 now with the same batch of whiskeys. That was at least 3 years ago. I have the 19-year-old version here. Anyway, his beard has only got more luxurious in the ensuing years. Dahi O'Connell is he has, like many of the families we talk about tonight and we focus on, they weren't born into whiskey families. They weren't born into the spirits industry. They had a vision, an idea. Dahi was working in Hong Kong. He was working in bars in Hong Kong. He's very interesting life, actually. Dahi, he is a pilot. He ran tour boats in Hong Kong. He qualified as a pilot. He said he's lived many lives, and his beard can tell many stories. And he had this idea to start an Irish whiskey brand. Initially, his idea was start a distillery, come back to Ireland, start a distillery. Quick realization, that seems very expensive. Don't start a distillery. Don't start that. Instead, become a whiskey merchant, a whiskey bonder, sourcing whiskey barrels and whiskey casks from various distilleries in Ireland and overseas. And that's what he's done. Excuse me. So this is his brand home is in this campus here, which is a old famine era workhouse set up in Kilmacthomas on the Waterford Greenway, which is a fantastic bike and walking greenway, which goes on for 20 plus miles through beautiful, beautiful countryside under the foothills of the Galtee Mountains. And it's about a 20-minute drive from Waterford City. And here's where we're going to visit for our whiskey bus visit. But there's also, if you want to, you can check out on our YouTube channel, you can have a complete tour of the workhouse and the maturation facility being built out there at W.D. O'Connell. Visit our website or go to our YouTube channel later and watch that. You can get a full behind the scenes tour of just what he's building out. This was before he installed all of his maturation racks, before he put in his bottling line, before he put in his tasting room, and all those things are almost in place right now. So we'll get to see those later in the year. Also, if you want to understand how he built that business, again, go to the website storiesandsips.com and you'll find a great interview on the business of sourcing, maturing, and batting casks. He's had a range of releases, and what's interesting and what I find what's interesting now that I'm only in the whiskey industry 6 years, 7 years, and even in that short space of time, the change that has happened has been astonishing. For example, in 2018 at Whiskey Live, when I first met Dahi was promoting this whiskey here, which is Bill Phil. Now, he's released 6 batches of this since. This is batch number 3 there. Bill Phil was the first peated triple distilled single malt released in Ireland in north of 50 years in 2018. Now, I did a post recently this week on the 85 plus peated whiskies that are now on the market in Ireland. 85. There was one other whiskey that was peated in Ireland, really, or maybe a handful of like small little batch releases, but Connemara was the only game in town in 2017, 2018. Then Bill Phil came along, and then almost like following that, like they'd been in production for a while and whiskeys that had been maturing and brands had been planning it, but there's been a solid trickle to the point where we now have 85 whiskeys that contain peated malt, peated grains in them. Dahi was one of the first of kind of the modern era to release this kind of independent indie brand of a peated whiskey. So fair play to Dahi. So he's taken some risks. Again, when you build a company where you're sourcing liquid, you're buying the barrels, you're paying for warehouse space, you're paying for packaging, you're paying for label design, you've got a lot of upfront costs. So I'm always trying to figure out, how do we promote and support more of these independent brands, especially in their early days when the money's being tied up in all kinds of things. There's no money for anything. Like, can we connect with them? Which is why so many of you have managed to connect with these brands. We've done as many events as we can with these indie brands to bring them to you so that they get a chance to tell their story. So do check out WD O'Connell if you haven't already. It's a great, I think a great example of somebody who's taken a lot of risk, and these things take time. He's now at it 5 years, just getting out to the expensive stage of building out the brand home. It doesn't get any cheaper. So that's one of our next featured whiskey brands, and we're going to see our family run whiskey brands, and we'll see Dahi O'Connell in Waterford in August as well. All right. Incidentally, he's got some really interesting releases. Like he's sourced Cooley malt, 19-year-old single malt here. He's also, and this is finished in a PX casks. He's also got some Scotch releases and blended Scotch and Irish releases that he's done. I see a 12-year-old single malt, a cask strength single malt behind me there. Small 12-year-old release as well. And he's also got a cask program. So if you're interested in supporting Dahi through his cask program, you could do that as well. And yes, he is has just arrived in the United States. His whiskeys are now available in Massachusetts. I see some of you mentioning there that his whiskeys have arrived in Boston and Massachusetts specifically. He did a tasting at Julio's and big liquor store in Massachusetts, and his whiskeys are now available on the East Coast in small quantities, and I think some of them perhaps through Folsom Wine and Spirits. They used to be anyway, but do check out if you're on the East Coast. I know Massachusetts can ship, but if you're in the Massachusetts area, you could get hold of those. There he is. He's still in here. He's still in the chat. How are you, Dahi? Dahi, the pressure's on you now for a big fun day in August for the Whiskey Bus. We've bigged you up so much here now that the expectations are big. All right, if you've just joined us, you're welcome to our celebration of family-run whiskey brands. We'll be here for the next 85 hours by the number of slides I have that I've put together. I'm on slide 16 of 78. This could go on for a bit. David just left Ireland on Monday. He's looking forward to going back again in August. David is on our whiskey bus again, returning for the second time. 100% track record on our whiskey bus. Come on, David. Right, Dahi sharing exactly where the whiskies are available. Folsom still has some. DC, Delaware, Maryland, Colorado, and Massachusetts. get it. Get hold of some of Dahi's whiskies, and you'll be happy that you did. And again, you're sporting new entrants to the world of Irish whiskey, and that's good for everybody. And he's got a brand home to build out. If you've just joined us from your Easter dinner or from watching the golf, you're very welcome. We are on our next family run whiskey brand, and this is very much a family operation from at every level of the organization. I'm talking about Boann Distillery in Drogheda in County Meath, and Boann Distillery is run by the Cooney family, and they are all involved, from Pat Cooney, the patriarch, all the way down to the doggy there, who chases any mice away from the fields from coming near the distillery. Everybody in the Cooney family is involved. The Boann Distillery is located about a 45-minute drive from Dublin, and it is in Drogheda in County Meath in the Boyne Valley. Great farming country, great land for barley, very fertile land, great food culture there. I was at the Boyne Valley Harvest and Boyne Valley Food Festival last year, a fantastic celebration of food and drink. So they really get their food and they get their drink there. The Boann Distillery is located in an old car dealership, of all things, and that big glass frontage designed to show off all of the cars, which I think were Toyotas. I could be corrected on that. But those Toyotas have been replaced by 3 copper pot stills, interesting copper pot stills too. They are deploying a nanotechnology inside the still. So basically the inside of the copper pot stills have been coated in a dimpled layer of copper, which is kind of those bumps and dimples that are added increase the surface area inside the still, allowing for more liquid to copper contact. Interesting. And it's that liquid to copper contact that you want during distillation to remove any of the harmful compounds you don't want, the sulfur, etc. So they have 3 copper pot stills. They've been producing single pots of whiskey in the distillery for the last number of years. They've been releasing sourced whiskeys since they were founded under their brand, The Whistler, named because Pat Cooney likes a good whistle. And at the top of the bottles, you will see, on some of the bottles anyway, when you take off, those are screw cap ones I see in the picture, but on others, there's the wooden top, and they've got little musical notes around the top of them. Anyway, he's a great man for the whistling. So the Whistler range of whiskies and Irish creams and honey have been in the market over the past. They've been released into the market over the past few years and have done very well for them. They've had some really great releases actually, and very innovative cask finishes, fantastic packaging, a great route to great kind of market approach. I think a big fan of how they've gone to market. And while they've been going to market with the Whistler, they've been laying down their own pots of whiskey. And our very own friend Fionnán O'Connor has been very involved with the distillery, and was for a good period of time helping them distill old vintage mash bills. So working with Michael Walsh, the distiller there at the time, to distill old heritage mash bills that he had found through his studies, and as part of his thesis, he wanted to bring back to life heritage varieties, or heritage mash bills, old heritage vintage mash bills that no longer fit the category or fit the technical definition of what a mash bill could be for pot still definition. Though by the time they reach maturity, they could be. But they did, was it 16 or 18 or 20 different, I have all the new mixed spirits here, different mash bills they released. They distilled them all individually, put them into different casks, and are maturing them currently. That was about 2 years ago. So we as a whiskey club actually have 2 of those casks, and when it comes time to decide what to do with them, we will we'll figure out how do we bottle those up or further mature them. But 2 of those vintage mash bill casks are part of the Stories and Sips Whiskey Club, which is great news. So Fionnán was involved in advising on that and supervised all these interesting mash bills that involved oats and wheat and rye and maize and barley, of course, and peated malt along the way. So that's something that'll see the light of day. I think they did about 100 casks at the time, maybe, that were released. They just released their first fully matured pot still whiskey on December 21st, called Solstice, aptly named because of that being the winter solstice, December 21st. And it's a 3-year-old single pot still whiskey. And that was available in very small quantities, I think, to those who visited, who were invited to the dinner there at the time. I couldn't go to it myself, and so I haven't tasted it. and that is available on their website, I think, their first ever release. So the Cooney family, very great fun to deal with, great to talk to, very helpful. Some great conversations with them, and always very open to chatting and sharing what they're up to at the distillery. So we celebrate the Cooney family. Next up, we are, if James is still with us, he might be still hanging in there. Only 55 minutes after we kicked off, we might still have him. We are going up to the rugged, lawless northwest of Ireland. We're going to Ardra in County Donegal to feature a family-run business, a family-owned, operated and run business in Ardra in County Donegal. I'm talking about Sleeve League Distillers. And this is where Moira and James Doherty have built their distillery. And it is unique in many ways. Donegal, Inishowen Peninsula, northwest of Ireland, historically the home of smoky spirits, poitín, whiskey, smoky, peated. That is the where smoky whiskies lived on for many, many years. In fact, as the rest of Ireland moved away from smoke, from peat, to the use of non-smoky fuels for heating the stills, for drying their barley. The northwest of Ireland has always had a history, a legacy, and has continued both legally and illegally distilling using peat, using turf from Donegal. The Ardra distillery in Donegal that James and Moira have built is a completely peated, smoky distillery, the first legal distillery in County Donegal in more than 100 years, which is fantastic. Here it is, a gleaming copper pots looking out over the lake. A wonderful new addition to the town. You can't miss it. I've seen photographs from the town. I've yet to get that far northwest. It's only a 5-hour drive from Cork, so it has to feature very soon on my itinerary to get up there. But James and Moira have invested a lot of time and money in their efforts to build out this distillery and to re-establish Donegal as the base of smoky whiskies. They're only making smoky whiskies. In fact, I could stand corrected, but I think it is the only distillery in Ireland that is committed to 100% peated or smoky or turfed, or however you'd like to call it, whiskies. You will know them perhaps more familiarly as the makers of and the producers of the Silky range of whiskies, which I'll talk about in a second. Ardara in County Donegal is, there you see it on the right-hand side of the screen. On the left, you'll see Sleeve League, the cliffs, the sea cliffs. That Sleeve League means the mountain of the stone pillars. Some of the largest sea cliffs in Ireland, I think the second largest in Ireland, some of the largest in Europe. And really, this Sleeve League sea cliffs there are really just, it's one big mountain that just goes down into the water, and super high and picturesque. But so many people in Ireland have never been that far northwest. It's hard to get to, and public transportation in Ireland has long let us down, so we couldn't be relying on that. But up in the northwest of Ireland is where the distilling is taking place. But the Silky range of whiskies, which is probably what I'm going to move on to next to sample and to try, is maybe what how you would have encountered Sleeve League distillers. They've gone to market as the Silky. They have four core range of whiskies in the market. They've got the red Silky, they've got the legendary Silky in that light blue label, they've got the legendary dark Silky in the black label, and in the dark blue label, the midnight Silky. And the midnight Silky being the most peated, and the light blue legendary Silky being the lightest, the lightest of the peated whiskies. These are the most available peated Irish whiskies in the United States by far. David Wood is the sales director, who has done an extraordinary job of getting these into probably all 50 states at this stage. There isn't a store in America that either doesn't have or couldn't have, if you ask them, Silky whiskies. Extremely affordable. Some of them as low as $35 to $38 a bottle, going up a little bit, but very affordable, very approachable. And these are blended whiskies, blends of malts, blends of malt and grain, blends of malt, grain, and peated malts, etc. Each of them slightly different. James was very helpful in trying to bring me on my peated journey with the legendary Dark Silky. And look at the bottle. I mean, these two bottles here, both the Midnight and the Dark Silky, are I've been working my way through them. So I'm going to pour a drop of Midnight Silky here. The Midnight Silky, the Dark Silky, and the legendary Silky, they're all available in the United States, as is the Red Silky to the best of my knowledge. I'm going to pour a drop of the Midnight Silky, which is the peatiest of them all. There's a cask strength of each of them too. So as I was doing diving into my list of all 85 peated whiskies that I found in Ireland this week, I discovered that there is a cask strength version of the Red Silky, a cask strength version of the legendary Silky, Dark Silky, and the Midnight Silky. I have the cask strength version of the Dark Silky here as well. The legendary Dark Silky and the Midnight Silky are fantastic introductions to peated whiskey. They're affordable. They are not absolute peat bombs, and there's a wonderful sweetness. I've often talked about the for me, it's like a green apple dipped in a kind of a smoky chocolate, if that was even possible. So there's a lovely sweetness, a crispness, and then a hint of smoke coming through for me in the legendary Dark Silky. Oh, the sweetness, and that's lovely. Eric says the Dark Silky is very mild. It's not like Isla. Yeah, they're milder. Hmm. Oh, that's lovely. The Midnight Silky is a fantastic drop. So this is per the spiel, the smokiest blend of single malts they released, finished in virgin oak and imperial stout, created to be savoured over the midnight watch. And James himself will say he always adds a drop of ice, a cube of ice to his whiskies, his silkies when he's drinking them. So fair warning there if you want to add a cube of ice. And it does. I've done that in the past as well. When we were doing some of our live events from California, virtual events with James, and he came on the lock-in. He insisted, go grab some ice, Barry. We're going to add some ice to this. Other things I've seen people add to their silkies are Fanta Orange or Club Orange, if you have it, ice, and the Silky, legendary Dark Silky or the Midnight Silky. Stacey with some great notes there on the Dark Silky. Easter ham, brown sugar and caramel, and salty ham. And we're very lucky, though, whether peat is your thing or not, that we've got this range of spirits, this range of whiskies that going back 10 years, even 5 years, they weren't available. In 2018, so that's 5 years ago, was when Bill Phil came out from W.D. O'Connell. A lot has happened in the 5 years since. What's going to happen in the next 5 years? Will that list of 85 peated whiskies have become 150 or 185? How many more non-peated whiskies will we have? There are more than 700 individual expressions of Irish whiskey on the market now. 700. Some of them you'll never come across in your markets, destined for one market only, maybe, or an area in your market that you might not see it. In fact, there's many Irish whiskies that we in Ireland don't see often as well. But it's remarkable, the growth, and long may the demand meet the supply. Silky is available in Ohio, yeah. All right, so let's move on. Oh, yes, they also make on Doulamon gin, and they source the botanicals and the elements, some of the yeah, this is quite interesting. Like, is it pepper seaweed? And they source for their Doulamon gin as well in Donegal. All right, let us go up to Galway. So we've left the rugged northwest coast of Donegal. We're moving south down to Ahascraw in County Galway. If you've just joined us, you're welcome to the Shebeen. We're heroing family-run whiskey brands in Ireland, knowing that the big brands have all the money to pay for advertising and the smaller ones don't. So we want to showcase them and hero them and bring them a little bit closer to you tonight. All we ask is you hit the like button if you're having the crack, and click the subscribe button. And also let us know what you're drinking in your glass. I'm now drinking the Midnight Silky. I'm on the dark side now. I've gone very dark, the peatiest of them all. We'll go peatier yet tonight, I'd say. All right. Ahascraw in County Galway is home to Ahascraw Distillery, and there you will find Gareth and Michelle McAllister, who are the founders of Ahascraw Distillery in East Galway. Behind them is the old mill, the old building that was abandoned, that was derelict in the village of Ahascraw, about an hour east of Galway city. And Garrett and Michelle wanted to get involved in the drinks world and the food world in Ireland, and they saw this as their opportunity. They've taken this mill and this old building, and within it, they have built a distillery within it. Now, I can't imagine there's anything harder. The only thing harder than building a distillery from the ground up is building a distillery within another building while trying to maintain the character of another building and some of the structure and uh, some of the elements that you want to maintain while constructing a brand new distillery. It hasn't phased them. They've done it. They're almost at the stage of commissioning their stills. They have taken the landscape and changed it in the town of Ahascraw. Here are the stills arriving not too long ago, the 3 copper pot stills in the back of a truck. And you see the roof cut open there in the distillery so that the stills can be lowered in. It's typically how in these still houses you see around the country, if you look very closely at the roofs, you'll often notice skylights above the distillery, above the stills. And those are really just flaps that can be opened to take out the stills if they need repairing, or put in new stills if they need to be lowered them through the roof. The Ahascraw Distillery is on target or attempting to be the first carbon neutral distillery in Ireland. They are very focused on a blend of kind of old approach to how distilling used to happen, but also maintaining not just the structures of the buildings, but how do we ensure that we're not taking from the environment? How do we ensure that we're neutral at worst, giving or carbon kind of positive, if we can be, to the environment. So they're doing a lot of hard work telling the story of East Galway and of Ahascraw, and bringing a lot of business to the town, a lot of potential tourism to the town, the visitor centre that they'll build there. The whiskies that they have in the market have gone under a few names. One is Clan Colla, which is an old ancient clan name in Ireland, and they've released really what I would consider some of the most beautiful looking packaging in the world of Irish whiskey. Their bottles are understated, elegant, beautiful labels, stunning quality on the paper, embossing is beautiful. The 19-year-old, which I have a bottle of here, that you'll see on the right-hand side, for me is maybe one of the most beautiful Irish whiskey bottles. It's just so simple, so beautiful, lovely little neutral color palette, gold and amber and white, and that's it, cream. But the paper is just lovely and dimpled, beautiful embossing. I'm very impressed with the whiskies they've released so far. They've sourced whiskies from Cooley Distillery. This 19-year-old is a double distilled single malt from Cooley Distillery. They have an 11-year-old, which I have right here, which has been aged in bourbon barrels. It's a blend of malt and grain that's then finished in sherry casks and peated casks. So when I think about a peated whiskey, I kind of ignore or eliminate or kind of skip over those that have been aged in peated casks as being peated whiskies, because they haven't had their grain peated. This is one of the ones in peated casks, but it's hard to share just the quality. But this label here, the shiny offsetting of this of their logo here, of the eagle, is incredible. Woody says he met Sean from Ahascraw at the New York Irish Whiskey Festival, a gentleman and a good drop. They're working very hard at the moment in Ahascraw to put the distillery on the map, and it won't be long before they're open. And I'm really excited to see what they do with it. It's always interesting to me to think about what a distillery does when they release whiskies into the market eventually. You know, that'll be 3, 4, 5 years away, where they've established a presence with other whiskies that were sourced from other distilleries, and that crossover or the separation of brands, whether Clan Colla stays as a brand on its own, and then Ahascraw Spirit has its kind of distillery has its own brand. Like, for example, Ecklinville Distillery, the Dunville's brand will remain in the future, but Ecklinville will have its own brand. And Old Cumber, for example, those will be separate brands based on what's distilled at Ecklinville and what's sourced. So it'll be interesting to see how different distilleries deal with that. Some, for example, like Tullamore Distillery, have moved and are almost completely moved over, transitioned back from sourcing their whiskies from the different distilleries in Ireland to make Tullamore Dew, to the point of almost having all of their spirit now coming from their new distillery. And that's been a slow process of changing over bit by bit by bit by bit over the last couple of years, and will continue, I'm sure, until all of the whiskey in their Tullamore Dew comes from the Tullamore distillery. And that's without changing the brand. It's just simply saying Tullamore Dew is as it always has been, or maybe slightly, it'll surely be slightly different, but that'll be interesting to navigate. Michael says he loves Hascraw's Facebook posts highlighting the construction process. Yeah, they do some good videos, great videos following the process. They've hired some architects and kind of heritage architects that are really focused on the preservation and working with old buildings, and they interview them and talk to them and have them share with us how they're going about dealing with a building of that nature and a site of that nature. So check them out online. Ahascra. It's a tough one for the old American spelling there and pronunciations. Ahascra. I'll show you what it. Ahascra. There it is. There. Ahascragh. Johnny says, I love to see old buildings being repurposed. It's interesting if you drive around Ireland today. Now that I've got my whiskey hat on, because you can't take a whiskey hat on once you put it, take it off once you put it on. Every town I drive through, I see these old mill buildings, typically on rivers, because the mills would have been powered by a mill wheel, which was powered by the river. And these old abandoned mills and grain stores that have no use anymore, that over the last 100 years have just fallen into disrepair, 3, 4, 5 stories high, solid brick buildings. And every time I see one, I'm like, that's a distillery waiting to happen. That's a distillery. It's on a water source. You can imagine another mill wheel. Any of these old distilleries that you'll see, Bushmills, Middleton, they're all, I mean, Kilbeggan, they're all built on rivers, aren't they? Because that's where the source of the water, and was the source of their power at the same time. Today, while you're not as reliant on that, when you have an old building like these, like Michelle and Gareth do in Ahascraw, which is itself built on the mill, built on the river, they can use that river to harness it, whether it's for water source or whether it's for power or whether it's for a feature, a water feature. All right. Next up, we are going to a new one for many of you, and I want to focus on this one for a little bit tonight. So this is a distillery that is newly opened in Lanesborough in County Longford. You don't often hear about Longford. Even when you're in Longford, you don't hear about Longford. Small little county on Loch Ree. The River Shannon, the longest river in Ireland, flows into Loch Ree. There you could sail up the River Shannon on a little cruiser, maybe an Irish whiskey experience waiting to happen, and you could sail right up to the distillery, which is everybody's dream. And there, the Loch Ree distillery is, they're putting the finishing touches to their distillery at the moment, but while they're waiting for the distillery to be built, they have released whiskies. But we talk about family businesses tonight. Loch Ree Distillery is a family business, 100% a family business. Let me pull up here some of the details here I want to share with you on this one. Bear with me. Got 45 different tabs open here. Okay, we'll come to this. So, Lanesborough, County Longford is the home of Loch Ree Distillery. Here you have the Clancy family, and the Clancy family have come together, 3 siblings, to build a whiskey and a spirits business right on Loch Ree. See if I can put it up here on my phone. All right. So we have Sheila on the left, and you've got Peter in the middle, and you've got Mike on the right, and the 3 of them run the business. And they have, while they've been building out Loch Ree Distillery, they've been sourcing whiskies and have done a great job of actually getting hold of really interesting casks. and they're about to land in the United States. In very small quantities. The United States is a target for them, but like any small business, a small family-run business, it's so expensive to conquer the US market, because there's no such thing as the United States market. There is the Massachusetts market, the Connecticut market, the New York market, and you go into one and you might have no luck in 49 others. So it's 49, 50 different approaches to marketing your business if you want to target the United States or pick out the markets that are going to give you the best return. California, New York, Massachusetts, Florida, easier to get to, density of people, maybe established whiskey channels already there, maybe an Irish population. All of those things are being weighed up. But the Clancy's are heading to the United States in small quantities. In fact, they are doing a tasting in Chicago this Thursday. So if any of you are in Chicago, I'm going to put a link in the, see if I can pull it up here. My notes app is playing games with me, but they are in Chicago this Thursday. As soon as I can, let me see if I can copy this and paste it. I'll put a link in here. There we go. Any case, I'll put that link in there. But here's a couple of their whiskeys that I want to talk about. The one on the left is called Bart's, and it's a blended Irish whiskey. And it's named for their father, Bart, who never got to see their whiskey dreams. Unfortunately, he passed away before they developed this distillery. But he was a great man for technical aspects of things, how things worked. He was a clock maker and repairer, and he loved understanding, taking things apart, finding out how they worked, putting them back together. And so when they were sourcing whiskeys, they put together this quite complex blend of whiskeys. I have a bottle of it here, which is a blend of grain, pot still, peated malt, and malt whiskeys that have been finished in rye and Oloroso casks. And that's quite a complex blend. Grain, pot still, peated malt, regular malt, finished in rye and Oloroso sherry casks. And they put this together and they named it for their father, and they put lots of horological details on the bottle, like the moving pieces of the clock there on the front. The A on the Bart's has that two hands there that look like the hands of a clock. Lots of interesting details, and they're right out of the gate. They are leading with transparency, because the back label of their bottle says our complex blend components. They're quite transparent here. 79% grain whiskey from maize that was aged in a bourbon cask. 11% triple distilled pot still that was aged in a bourbon cask. 5% triple distilled malt aged in a rye cask. 3% triple distilled malt aged in an Oloroso cask, and 2% triple distilled peated malt aged in a bourbon cask. So those three were 5 components married together to create this blended Irish whiskey called Bart's, 46% ABV. That's heading to the United States, certainly to the East Coast and to Chicago, Illinois area very soon. But keep an eye out for them, because they have some really interesting source casks as well. So on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see here one of their bottlings called, their series is called The Bridge. This one is, can't see the name of that one, but they had about, if you go to their website, it's lrd.ie. Put it in here. You'll see the range of whiskeys that are available on their website. It's incredible, that are all single casks. And when they're gone, they're gone. I've tasted some of their really amazing single grain whiskeys and single malts, and they're well worth checking out. So I wanted to hero the Clancy's tonight and their work, because we're going to hear a lot more from them. I think they know what they're doing. They're extremely competent at building a business and marketing a business, and I've been very impressed every conversation I've had. Michael Clancy, who was on the far right of the screen here, Michael was interviewed by me at length for the Waterford Whiskey podcast. So if you've listened to season 2 of the Waterford Whiskey podcast, there are 2 or 3 episodes focused on peated whiskey and the peat, historical kind of peat and peat industry in Ireland. The Clancy family grew up right in the middle of peat country in Ireland, where they had what's called a Bord Namona factory. Bord Namona was the Irish government department tasked with harnessing the power of peat for energy, for consumption, for commercial use, turning it into a kind of an economic benefit to the country. And they grew up in a town that was established because of the peat industry. Their father and their mother met in a school teaching. They were brought there to teach in a school that was established for kids of those families working in the peat industry. In fact, Lochry Distillery has a a vodka. Is it a vodka or a gin? I think it's a gin. That it's a gin actually that uses peat as a botanical, not for heat, not for smoking, but as a botanical inside the gin. So really interesting things happening in Lanesborough in Longford. And if you've got a boat that fits on the River Shannon, you can sail up to the distillery and drop in for an old drop of whiskey and then sail back out again. Everyone's a winner. Let's get to clicking, says Bob, on the likes. Hit the like button on the website, or sorry, on YouTube there, folks. If you're watching, just click the like button. It won't take you away from the video as you're watching, and it'll help more people see our videos. All right. We are moving west again, this time to Limerick. We are going to Thomond Gate. Our friend Nick Ryan in Limerick, a great friend of ours. I got to know Nick over the years. He started his business around the same time I started Stories and Sips, and we've been in close contact ever since. We talk regularly, and Nick is building, it really is a family business. That's how family a business is. There's Nick, his wife, and his two kids in the field in Limerick where he's growing barley that'll become his whiskey. And his kids go out and they watch the combine harvesters cut down the barley at harvest time, and they grow up in a house that is probably covered in whiskey packaging and labels and bottles and paraphernalia, and it's an all family affair. The whiskey business in Ireland is many brands are one man bands. They are people like Nick just doing his thing, supported by his family who support the dream and the vision. And Nick is the company. You know, he's the, if you reach out to Thomond Gate whiskey, you're reaching out to Nick. If you buy a bottle of whiskey, or if you taste any of his whiskeys at a tasting, you're tasting from Nick. He'll probably have poured the whiskeys for you. So it's a real family run business. Nick is a Limerick man, and the family journey and the family story continues on beyond just the family that you see here on the screen. But Nick got the idea for his family, for his whiskey business, in his own family's hotel that his parents used to run in Limerick. So Nick grew up in Limerick. His parents ran a hotel in Limerick City, and Nick remembers cleaning mirrors in the bar, and one of the mirrors mentioned this Thomond Gate whiskey, which was a distillery and a whiskey brand that had long since disappeared. But he researched it and found out that it had been one of the largest distilleries in the West Coast and indeed in Ireland, exporting a lot of their whiskey to the United States, long since disappeared, but it was right there in the heart of Limerick. And Nick thought, you know, why is there not distilling in Limerick today? And so Nick is on a journey to bring distilling back to Limerick step by step. His first step was sourcing whiskey and starting to tell the story of Limerick. His next step was growing his own barley in Limerick, which hasn't grown malting barley for many years. Having that whiskey, having that barley distilled in Great Northern Distillery to his own specifications, and then maturing it in Great Northern. The next steps will be maturing that same whiskey made with his own barley in Limerick. And then final step will be the building of a distillery that'll make whiskey using his barley, and it'll mature the whiskey that's been made using his barley in Limerick as well. And when that happens, he will well and truly have brought distilling back to Limerick. So Thomond Gate whiskey is who we're heroing here at the moment. Thomond Gate whiskey just scooped some big awards at the Irish whiskey, or the International Wine, Whiskey and Spirits, or Wine and Spirits competition, which is a blind competition. And his Ruby Port cask finish scooped gold for 95 points at the International Wine and Spirits competition. And that whiskey, incidentally, is available at Folsom Wine and Spirits in California. And I have a bottle of it here, which I opened on one of our previous shebeens. His whiskeys are really interesting because every whiskey comes with a story, and I mean a historical story, a piece of fact from history, not a manufactured story. This one, the port cask finish, heroes the journey of a man called Miguel Hogan, who was one of the Irish brigade who left Ireland for France to fight in the French army. And then he left for Portugal. And he was a hero at the Battle of Campo Mayor against the Spanish in 1712. His hugely outnumbered force defended Portugal from the Marquis de Bay, the scourge of the Portuguese. His victory was rewarded with lands, and later Miguel Hogan married into Portuguese aristocracy, raising a distinguished family with descendants still there to this day. In memory of Miguel Hogan and the blood he shed for Portugal, we've sourced a single malt whiskey which has been finished in a ruby port cask from Portugal, a tribute to his rebellious spirit, which found hope and peace in his adopted homeland with a Portuguese marriage. Now, it's almost like every sip has a story, right? There's Michael Clancy in the comments. Good man, Michael. We'll get up to Lanesborough. I'll foot some turf. I'll be happy to do it. You'd have to stick a camera on me though at the same time so we can share it with the with our group here. And the link there, I put the link in the comments for the event in Chicago this week as well. All right, thanks, Michael. Right, let's keep moving along. If you do want to learn more about Thomond whiskey, by the way, we did a great event with Nick Ryan last year, a Meet the Maker event, which is available on storiesandsips.com. Our Meet the Maker events are one of our whiskey club features where we bring you to meet the people who make the whiskeys that you like virtually. So we'll do private Zooms where you can open your videos, you can open your microphones, you can talk to the makers. They'll share with you their story. I'll chat with them. And then if you've got any questions you have directly of them, of how they built their business or their particular whiskeys or their plans, then it's an open floor. And it's a great chance to get closer to those people who sometimes we don't get the chance to meet. So we bring a new maker to the club every month to meet our members. And Nick Ryan was one of our Meet the Makers. That's archived, as all of our Meet the Maker events are, on storiesandsips.com. So check that out if you're interested in diving into understanding a bit more about Nick's business. Next up, Walsh Whiskey. Okay, so you might not be familiar with the name Walsh Whiskey, but you'll certainly be familiar with the whiskey brands produced by Walsh Whiskey. We're heading to Carlow in the east, kind of southeast of Ireland. And Walsh Whiskey is the home of Bernard and Rosemary Walsh. And Bernard and Rosemary Walsh built the Royal Oak Distillery in County Carlow. They spent 6 odd years building and establishing the Royal Oak Distillery in Carlow, but you will know them more for their whiskies, the Irishman range of whiskies and Writer's Tears. Long before there was an Irish whiskey renaissance, long before Dingle Distillery opened up, Bernard and Rosemary Walsh were busy evangelizing Irish whiskey around Europe and the United States in the 1990s, establishing trade routes for Irish whiskey distribution channels that just didn't exist. They started with a Irish coffee liqueur called the Irishman, which eventually morphed into the Irishman range of whiskies and the Writer's Tears range of whiskies. And they have been flying the flag for Irish whiskey for many, many years as an independent brand originally. Then they built the Royal Oak Distillery, which is now part of Ilva Serono, a Italian company. And the Walsh Whiskey Company itself was acquired recently, but it is still very much a family business. And we couldn't talk about family run or family whiskey companies in Ireland without mentioning the Walshes, Bernard and Rosemary, because they've done a tremendous job of getting Irish whiskey on the map. And when I was in London last week at the World Whiskies Awards, Bernard Walsh deservedly was recognized in the Hall of Fame. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame, one of only 85 Hall of Fame inductees in the last 25 years for his contribution to the world of Irish whiskey and to whiskey generally. Writer's Tears, Irishman broke new ground when they were released. The idea of a brand like Writer's Tears, not just being the name of a distillery or the name of the owner or the name of a place, was quite remarkable at the time. Drew on stories of of Ireland's literary past, inspired by Joyce and Yeats and the trials and tribulations and the challenges of being a writer. And I think that's quite similar to the trials and tribulations of being a whiskey company owner. So we're heroing the Walshes and Walsh Whiskey as the family whiskey company here tonight. They've got cask strength Irishman that gets released every year. There's an Irishman 17-year-old. Stacey says one of the greatest whiskies, which is very good as well. And their writers' tiers expressions are unique in the sense that they are blended whiskies, but they're not blends of grain whiskey and malt or grain whiskey and pot still, but rather a blend of pot still and malt whiskey, which would be maybe colloquially known as the champagne of blends, because you don't normally take the two most expensive grains and blend them together. You'll take one expensive grain and one cheaper grain like maize and corn grain whiskey, and you'll blend that in. But Writer's Tears is a blend of pot still whiskey and single malt sourced from the two distilleries most known in Ireland for single malt and single pot still. You know yourselves. Jeff says the old cast strength Irishman bottles are some of my favorite children. We won't tell your children. Next up, we're going to one of our most recent collaborations and some great friends we have made through the world of whiskey. I'm talking about Redemin Estate and the Short Cross whiskey brand in Crossgar in County Down. But before we do that, I need to pause for a sip of something to oil the pipes. All right, I'm going to pause for a second. Let me know what you're drinking. What's in your glass tonight? Let me know. And if you are enjoying the chat, will you give us a like, give us a comment, give us a share? That's all we ask. We don't ask for much. Price of admission is nothing except a like. Rick says he loves Writer's Tears. Oddly enough, a random Scottish guy introduced you to Redhead in Killarney back in 2018. Now, Scott knew that he had nothing good to offer from his own country, let's be honest. Stacey just poured some Thomond Gate Ruby Port. It's some drop. It takes water, that Ruby Port, but very flavorful, very robust, layered, complex, weighty whiskey. Here's Lisa now. Hi, Lisa. Happy Sunday. Happy Easter. Oh, looks like I should find my Irishman 17 samples. You should. Fat Daddy on YouTube. It's funny when we see YouTube names that are completely different to real names, and we don't know who people are sometimes. But Fat Daddy, work away. He's got Stories and Sips Short Cross and the Tua. Good man. All right, I think I have to move on to my Stories and Sips Short Cross too. It's only fair. You wash this glass out here. Here's our Stories and Sips Short Cross. Again, folks, only 8 of these bottles left out of 300. I can't believe we've gone through 292 bottles. It's incredible. Our biggest ever release of whiskies for our Stories and Sips Whiskey Club, 300 bottles, which is fantastic. I'm going to pour a drop of it here. This was a historic whiskey. When we released it, it's the first single malt, peated single malt distilled in Northern Ireland in almost 100 years. It is the first peated whiskey released from the Redemin Estate Distillery under the Short Cross name. And it's their first single cask that went to the United States. And we were lucky enough to get it for our Stories and Sips Whiskey Club. And it is a bomb. It is a absolute banger of a whiskey. 6 years and 10 months in one single cask. An ex-orange and orange liqueur and cognac cask. Oh, and I'm delighted to make its acquaintance again tonight, I can tell you. Jeff's joining everyone with some Stories and Sips Short Cross. Fair play. Fair play. It's a mighty drop, a mighty drop. So let's talk a little bit about Short Cross. Oh, the nosiness again. Every time I come back to it, I'm just reminded of this orange chocolate. It's just fantastic. We got to know our wonderful friends, Fiona and David Boyd Armstrong, over the past few months. And they founded Redemin Estate Distillery on the grounds of their own family estate, very much a family business here. They only have to walk out their door and there is their distillery right there on the grounds of their family estate. Redemin Estate in Crossgar. It's about a 45-minute drive from Belfast in County Down, and they started the distillery 10 years ago, distilling gin, distilling poitín, and then distilling whiskey. They were not born into the liquor world, into the spirits world, into the whiskey world. They are just enthusiasts, and they've really enjoyed they really, really enjoyed, they are big into the food and drink scene themselves, and they wanted to do something in it. And so they started this distillery to pursue their own love of food and love of drink. Former real estate professionals and missile engineers, would you believe, which gives them unique expertise when it comes to building stills and engineering the stills, of course. But David and Fiona have been good friends to us. I've gotten to know them and count them as friends as well. And we visited them on our whiskey bus last year, and there we tasted this whiskey that we eventually released as our own, that peated single malt, which is an absolute banger of a whiskey. There's the distillery. The big Shorecross logo can be seen from space, that you see on the ground there. The only whiskey distillery in Ireland whose logo can be seen from space, up there at the Great Wall of China, and Redemption Estate Distillery. And there's our beautiful bottle sitting in front of the distillery. So very much a family business. Fiona and David are there every single day. No matter when you go there, they're there, and they are hands-on. David is the distiller, and Fiona manages the rest of the business. And together they run the Redemption Estate Distillery. So we hero them and we showcase them tonight because they've been great friends to us. And I would love to do more with them. I would love to do another release. They have a fantastic approach and philosophy when it comes to distillation and whiskey making. They don't rush anything. They don't bring anything to market that's not taken a lot longer than it had to. Distillation, fermentation times are double or triple what other distilleries will do, which allows for greater creation of flavors, allows for malolactic fermentation, double fermentations. It allows for new esters and flavors that otherwise wouldn't be present in the wash. Distilling is done slowly and at low temperatures. It takes longer to distill, and they double distill in Redemption Estate. They don't triple distill, and then they mature for as long as it takes. And this whiskey that we have took almost 7 years to mature, and they have unique wood types, chinkapin oak. They've got great approach to maturation, sourcing really good ex-wine casks and virgin oak casks as well. And I really like what they're doing. I think they're going to come out some really interesting mash bills, like rye whiskies. They've already released a malt and a rye. There's a lot of interesting things that are going to come out of Redemption Estate. And so we hero this family that are taking big chances and big risks up there in County Down. And we toast them with a sip of their very own whiskey tonight. Eric, thanks for the support. You've got 3 bottles of Shorecross, but I've not cracked one open yet. You'll be bringing one with them to Scotland. That's it, Eric. You show the Scots what a peated Irish whiskey tastes like, just 50 miles from their own shore. Fair play to you. And of course, we have lots of content on our website and storiesandsips.com to do with Redemption Estate, including the wonderful release party that we had for our whiskey, where we chatted with Fiona and David, and we had our group tasting together of the whiskey, which is fantastic. We've got our Meet the Maker event with David. We've got lock-ins that we've hosted with them. So lots of content on storiesandsips.com with Shorecross whiskey. Next up, and one of the last ones that we'll talk about officially, is our friends in JJ Corrie, which is another great collaborator of ours. So I mentioned earlier on, and if you've just joined us, you might have missed it, that our first ever Stories and Sips Whiskey Club tasting had 3 bottles in it, 3 miniature bottles. One was from Dingle, one was from the Sleeve League Distillers, was the legendary Dark Silky, and the other was JJ Corrie's The Gale. Those 3 whiskies all made up our first ever tasting box, which meant that our first tasting box was a family-owned whiskey brand tasting box, which is fantastic. And tonight, all 3 of those brands are featured. Dingle, Sleeve League Distillers, and now JJ Corrie and our friend Louise McGuan, fresh off her win for best small batch single malt in the world for the Flintlock at the World Whiskies Awards in London last week. Delighted to see her win and to be there while she collected her award on stage. We're going to talk a little bit about this family business, because it's very much a family business, because it's built on her family farm. There's Louise standing in the emptiest that rack house will ever be, because today it's like 3 or 4 levels high, and she's building additional facilities to store all of the whiskey she's sourcing. Louise is a whiskey bonder, little like Dahi O'Connell. Louise is building a library of spirits. She's sourcing interesting whiskey and interesting casks, interesting spirits, new make spirit, aged whiskies, and casks from around the world to mature in her warehouse and her family farm in County Clare on the west of Ireland. And there she is blending to the specifications of her clients' flavor profiles, their profile interests, her own beliefs in what the market will have interest in, or what she likes, or what she thinks will be interesting or unique. She showcases wood, she showcases distillates, and she showcases what can be done when you blend in different ratios that just can't be done in one single distillery, because she can vat and marry, hiccups. She can vat and marry different distilleries' whiskies together and release them to us to enjoy. There is her maturation facility on the farm. She's building a separate rack house, or what will really be a rick house, one of Ireland's first rick houses, not under the shadow of the cliffs of Moher, not too far away. And that, subject to planning permission, will go ahead very soon as well. Why is it also a family business? Well, it's full of animals. Pets are people too, aren't they? And there's lots of four-legged friends in JJ Corrie's farm in Clare, which isn't officially open to the public, but you can arrange tours. And if you're a member of our club, there'll be no issue of getting in to visit JJ Corrie's farm. That's Ruby, her small little doggy. But there's also miniature horses and big full-size horses on the farm as well. And there's cows that'll come up to the window and they eat out of your hand. And it's a family business through and through. Her uncles, her cousins come and help roll barrels, drive forklifts to move things around when she gets deliveries. It is really, really hands-on. And we have been lucky to collaborate with Louise. In fact, we have released more whiskies with Louise than any other whiskey company in Ireland. 4 of our 6 whiskies that we've released have come from, or 7 whiskies that we released have come from Louise. The Story, which was our original whiskey before we even had a whiskey club, all the way back in 2020, 2021, 2020, I think. Just the pandemic kicked off, we managed to bring this Story to market. Still one of my favorite whiskies. There was a bottle here somewhere. A rare sighting of the Story. There she is. And on top of that, look, the first time Stories and Sips was ever on a label. Very proud moment for all of us. And then we also had the great release of the Cliffs of Moher, where we brought 9 quarter casks of whiskey up onto the Cliffs of Moher to mature them. So there's been some really fun collaborations that has resulted in extraordinary whiskey. Like these 2 whiskies couldn't be more different in color, in composition. One of them is a blend, one of them is a single malt here. But they're extraordinarily different, extraordinary whiskies. And I'm really, really proud of them and really stand over them. And Louise, I talked earlier about Dingle being the inspiration for many whiskey brands. Louise talks about how Dingle, the business plan for Dingle, came across her desk when she was working for a drinks company in London. And she saw that as a kind of a sign and an inspiration and a reason to start in the drinks business herself, independently of the big companies. And she started her own whiskey bonding business as a result of the efforts that Dingle were going to and the risks they were taking. And so that's a kind of a cycle that we're seeing repeat. This cycle of inspiration, risk, and every new entrant to the world of whiskey, every family and every individual that takes a risk, gives up their job, gives up the security of a salary, and puts all of their money and other people's money into something that may or may not be successful, I think deserves our support. And a wise person, one of the best bits of advice I ever got from somebody was, if a friend does something, buy it. No matter what they make, what they produce, buy a thing a friend does, because that one purchase can mean the difference between paying their bills and not paying their bills. And we want to support our friends. So like Louise has a barrel club herself that is available to Ireland, which I joined when she did it, only for, not that I need any more whiskey, but because we want to support and we want to try and do what we can to bring more success to these smaller whiskey brands that need as much support in their early years as possible. And I think you've all been so supportive of so many of these brands, and they tell me, they talk to me, and they share how amazing it is that they've gotten to know you. And I see it myself. I see on social media when certain whiskey brands or individuals post things on social media, and I see in the comments that the majority of people commenting are from our community. And that means the world to them, and it means the world to me. And it shows that you've connected with them. You're now friends, you're customers, and that's a good thing. And long may things like that continue. So we have now gone through 20 plus brands. Now there's more that we haven't mentioned. For example, we should give some hat tips right now and kind of honorary mentions, and not even honorary mentions, but just mentions to those that look. I could go all night talking about different brands. Cologne Distillery, run by Brendan Carty, supported by his wife. Obviously, Cologne Distillery, a massive early success in the world of Irish whiskey. We'll talk a lot more about them in the future because we'll collaborate with them. Tipperary Boutique Distillery in Tipperary. Not a whole lot heard about them in the United States at the moment, despite them having some sourced whiskey in the market. But that's a family-run business. We'll come back and talk about Tipperary. We haven't talked about the Teeling family. They're not really a family. They're a different type of family-run business in the sense that they're highly capitalized. And I would argue that Teeling is majority owned by Bacardi. It's a massive company today. John Teeling himself is a businessman, 100%. He sees whiskey as an investment and as a means of growing value for shareholders, which is a good thing. But I think about them in a slightly different way. I think John Teeling and the Teeling family have grown the Irish whiskey industry, yet I think of them in a slightly different way than I think about a smaller individual who's put everything on the line, which John Teeling did in the past as well. So they're also worth mentioning. And there's others. There's others that we've mentioned that are run by families, where the kids work in the business, where the cousins work in the business. And we can't mention them all here tonight. But if there's ones that I've forgotten about that deserve a mention, we'll come back to this again and again. And there'll be more because there's 10 or 12 whiskeys I spotted tonight going through my shelves that are all run by families that I haven't even talked about yet, that are still just coming to market, and they've sent me on samples, and so they're all out there. There's lots more to come. Lots more to come. All right, let me look at these comments coming in thick and fast. Some of you talking about remembering the days when you thought $80 was a lot for a bottle. Listen, I remember that. It's a slippery old slope. I remember there's a few moments I remember very clearly in my own whiskey journey that demonstrate to me the horrifying slope that is the whiskey world, but also show how quickly that slope comes and how there's no rope to hold oneself up on that slide as you slide down into oblivion. Because once we start hearing the stories and tasting whiskeys and meeting the people and getting bought into the hype of releases and trying to keep up, it becomes quite an expensive hobby, I will admit. And other hobbies kind of lose investment because there's only so much to go around, and the whiskey tends to get it. But I do remember one moment, which was not long ago, which was probably 7 years ago. So as I was just getting into Irish whiskey, maybe 2015, and I was drinking Jameson Black Barrel. That would have been something I wouldn't even call it a daily sipper. I thought like that would have even been too much to drink on a daily basis. What, like Jameson Black Barrel was like a $40 bottle. And I was living in Ohio. I remember in a previous company that I used to run, it's a consulting company, and I remember meeting a client. And when he found out I was Irish, because I met him for the first time, oh, you're Irish. He said, I'm a big whiskey fan. I said, really? Yeah. He said, yeah. Oh, he said, I'm a massive Irish whiskey fan. He said, I drink Irish whiskey every day. I said, you do? I said, what do you drink? And he said, Middleton Very Rare. and my jaw nearly dropped. I couldn't believe it. Middleton Very Rare. You drink Middleton Very Rare every day. He said, that is my daily sipper. I have it every evening after dinner, before I go to bed, sit down, relax with a glass of Middleton Very Rare. And I could not fathom that somebody existed in the world that drank Middleton every single day. Like that they had that much money that they could spend $200 on a bottle. It blew my mind. Like, I didn't know people spent $200 on a bottle of whiskey except for maybe once in their lifetime. Um, and it just goes to show, when you see some of the things that we then discover and start spending money on, and the price points we crash through on our journey, as we get more involved in this, it's frightening and it's unsustainable. That's all I'll say. It's unsustainable. Johnny says, have to pour a bit of the Cliff's pot still, not much left. Well, look, we have heroed and showcased 20 or so different brands here tonight, family brands. I think some of them will have been new to you, that won't have been on the radar. Some of them will be familiar to you and friendly to you. I want us to support these brands. You can go back and watch this tomorrow. You can get all these slides. You can get the details and some of the stories behind each of these brands. But wouldn't it be great if those that are new to you and you hadn't come across before, you went to their social media channels, you follow them on Instagram, you follow them on Facebook or Twitter, and you just kept an eye on them and kept a tab on them and started to learn about what they do. And they might come out with something that you're interested in. And even a like, even a share, even a comment on their social media is as good as a purchase when a brand is trying to get started. So go and do that if you can. And if you can go and buy something from a smaller brand, then do that too. Because it does mean the world to them. If you can't, of course, don't be stretching yourselves for whiskey. It's only whiskey at the end of the day. And don't put yourselves into any financial trouble to pursue the next great whiskey. There'll be many more coming behind it, cheaper and more expensive every time. But we'll continue to find ways to bring the smaller brands closer to us. And those are the conversations I'm having at the moment for our whiskey releases. It's predominantly with the smaller, nimble, independent brands, and it works in our favor too. They're quicker to make a decision. They can do things quickly. They can make a decision on the spot. They don't have to ask 15 layers of people whether something can be done, and that's helpful too for us. So as we grow the club, we'll focus more on them. It doesn't mean to say we won't get excited by something from a larger brand every now and again, but for me, the crack is in the people and getting access to them, spending time with them, getting to learn from them, and getting to enjoy their visions, their crack, their humor, their insights, learn from them, be entertained by them, and hopefully meet up with them and have a drink with them every now and again as well. Slippery slope indeed. Slippery slope, says Johnny. David says, 8 years ago, I had about 10 bottles of whiskey and other spirits and half were mixers. Most expensive was tequila. I love it, $65. Now I have 160 bottles. See, isn't it amazing? Amazing. Unbelievable. All right, folks, that is it for tonight. That's it for the Shebeen. We will be back with you next Sunday with another Shebeen, I believe. Let me see, make sure we're on the right dates. There's nothing there. Yeah, next Sunday we'll have another one. And I will see you all in our Facebook community this week. We will be releasing some more content into our website this week, some more educational articles in our website, and storiesandships.com. And again, on Wednesday, we'll be pulling our Shortcross whiskey from the market. The 8 bottles, if they're still there on Wednesday, we're going to pull them and store them in our shelves, in our liquid archive that we're building at Stories and Sips, full of samples of the story and the crack and the Cliffs of Moher and Talnua and Shortcross. There will be an ongoing liquid archive so that we'll always have a bottle or two of the whiskies we release in our archive for emergency purposes. But if you are interested in our Shortcross whiskey, visit storiesandships.com. The links are all there. And I recommend you do get it while it's hot if you do want another bottle. Again, not a pressure tactic, just a little bit of a heads up. So some of you getting back to the recorded masters and family that are hanging around, fair play to you. Off you go and enjoy yourselves. And I will see you in the Facebook community later this week. So sláinte, everybody. Thanks for all the support and thanks for supporting all the independent family whiskey brands. We'll talk to you all soon. All right. Sláinte.